Councilor Costo,
Here.
Councilor Lawyer. Here. Mayor Pro Tem Woodruff,
Here.
Mayor Yazzie,
Here.
and Councilor Gonzalez.
Present.
That brings us to the reading of the Indigenous Land Acknowledgement.
This is a call to honor and respect Indigenous sovereignty and self-determination. As residents and visitors of Durango, we are called upon to educate ourselves about the history and cultural heritage of the land we inhabit. The city of Durango is situated on the ancestral homelands and territories of the Nuchu, Ute, Jicarilla Apache, Pueblos of New Mexico, Hopi-Sinom, Hopi, and Diné Navajo nations. The original stewards of this land were forcibly removed and exposed to countless atrocities by the United States government, including repeatedly broken treaties, forced assimilation, the tragic legacy of Indian boarding schools, and the loss of ancestral homelands. We recognize lasting generational trauma exists within Native communities today. We affirm the continuing importance of ancestral sites to descendant communities as integral to the living cultural landscape. This acknowledgement only becomes meaningful when combined with accountable relationships and informed actions. May this serve as a step toward inclusion and reconciliation.
The first item under staff presentations is the Financial Services Report.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. This financial report is for the month ended February 2026 under the Strategic Goal Organizational Stewardship. Before we get into the report, I did want to acknowledge that obviously March has just ended. However, due to timing, we haven't closed out the month yet. And so we'll be going through the month ended February. Also online, we do publish monthly financial reports on our transparency portal. So also we are wrapping up 2025 processes for year end. We're completing accruals and adjustments that take place annually. These happen for a few months after year end. And so we are also expecting our auditors on site later this month, and the audit will be completed prior to June 30th. And we'll present our audit report to you before that date. So these year-end accruals can affect 2026 numbers as well. So I just wanted to give you a couple of examples of that. For instance, we may collect revenue in 2026 and record it in 2026 and then find this was really for 2025 as we're going through those procedures and accrue it back. We do have a 60-day measurement period after year-end. And then in the same manner, an expense could be first recorded to 2026, and then as we go through these procedures, move it back to 2025 during this period. And then a more obvious one, personnel. The first pay period of the year usually includes some costs for days in 2025, and those are recorded back to 2025 as well. So this slide just tells about the finance department. It's focused mostly on the finance division responsibilities, but includes our division includes those of fleet and facilities maintenance and customer service. But these responsibilities include accurate transactions and reporting in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles, facilitating the audit, the budget, paying vendors, putting out bids, facilitating contracts for goods and services, treasury and financing functions, preparing utility bills and maintaining customer accounts, servicing the city's fleet and providing facilities maintenance, and of course, providing excellent customer service to our internal and external customers and partners. So again, financial services is made up of finance, customer service, and fleet and facilities maintenance. Again, this is a preliminary report due to some of those accruals that are still happening. So just some statistics and information of some of these initiatives that we're currently working on. As mentioned, the audit preparation is currently underway for 2025. This week, we're kicking off the 2027 budget process with staff internally. And we have issued 21 bids for major projects already in 2026. Fleet and facilities, we've had 28 special requests that have been completed, 142 work orders for fleet, 126 pieces of inventory issued over the counter. This is for parts and repairs, and put 6 new plows, snow plows into service. Additionally, customer service is working alongside the Public Works Department on a rate study as part of master plan, providing reports and meter information and completing meter audits. So getting into some of the financial data. So first we'll consider the general fund. We'll likely spend the most time on the general funds, and this is where we have a large variety of funding and payments for expenses. And so February is 2 months into the year. So if we were to divide revenues and expenses equally over the entire year, we would say that we would be at 16.67% of the budget. And that's what we would expect to be recognized. Of course, many times with both revenues and expenses, this is not the case. We collect revenues and arrears in many cases, and sometimes this is just not how it works out, but we can use this as a guide and look at areas that this may be different. So the last 2 columns on this slide are comparison columns, and so we see a variance to the prior year actual. So that shows the difference in where we are at the end of February in this year versus where we were February of last year. And then the 2026 actual percent, that's where I was just referring to, 16.67%. This is where we actually are in that revenue or expense line. So sales tax, many times we look at, this is our largest revenue in the general fund. This is the 2% general sales tax that we collect. So we see that as compared to February of 2025, we do have an increase of 4.56% at February. And we are at 17.7% of our budget. So the these next two sales taxes, these are at 0 right now, but as you see, they were at 0 this same time last year. These are actually collected quarterly by the county. The first one represents a 1% that is shared that the county collects, and the city's portion is 36% of this tax. The next one is the joint sales tax, which goes into the joint fund. This funds the library operations. Additionally, property taxes collected by the county and then paid to the city for the city's mills. We do pay a 2% fee, administrative fee for this service. And we are at less than 2% of collections for February. And then we see these use taxes. These are very volatile and will not be measured in the same way. Our electric franchise fee, we're at about 3% above last year. And there is a negative number there in other taxes and fees. This is due to some accruals, and we do expect this to even out by the next report. If we look to the next category, charges for services, we have parks fees. The total of these are at around 7% over last year. And underneath that, we have transfers and services provided by other funds. As you will see, these are exactly at 16.67%. And that is because we do allocate those out throughout the year and transfer them evenly. The next category that we have is interest. You'll see that we are down in interest as compared to last year. And then we have building permits and other licensing permits. We are also down there. So overall, for the general fund, revenues are 5% or almost 6% less than the same time last year in 2025. And we have collected about 10% of our budgeted revenues. This is just a little more information on the sales tax revenues. So again, we're showing that we're at 4.56% over the same time as last year, but we do see that broken out for January and February. In January, we're about a 5.5% increase, and in February, about 3%. Overall, last year in 2025, we did collect 101% of our budget, and we had about a 3% increase overall over 2024. So now we have the general fund expenses, and this shows by department and broken up how they're reported with the audit. We do usually show expenses by goal area, and we will report this way in future presentations. Public safety is up over 62% over the same period last year. This is mostly due to the increase in the fire district contract. This did increase 47% for 2026. Additionally, public safety has expended 21% of the annual budget. Then we have the various departments that make up general government. There's a 5% increase over prior year expenses, and we've expended about 20% of the budget. In Parks and Recreation, we have a little bit under a 3% increase over the same period in 2025, and we've expended about 13 or almost 14% of the budget. And on Public Works, I do apologize. It looks like the streets division was cut off of our table. The total there is correct. We're just missing that row in our table. But we're at 6% over last year, and Public Works has spent about 15% of their budget. Community service includes the library and community services. This is community service funding such as Team Up, La Plata Youth, and CORE, these contracts. It also includes the food tax rebate and utility rebates. And then non-departmental includes citywide expenses such as liability insurance, property and unemployment insurance, as well as energy performance lease payments. And these are up 55 and 62% over the prior year, but this is likely due to the timing of payments, as they are both in line, as you can see, around 17% and 13% expended of the budget. So overall, our total down at the bottom, we're around 28% over the same period in 2025. And again, a lot of times this can be due to timing of expenses, and 18% of the annual budget is expended. Moving to the water fund. Water fund for services revenue is up 6% due to fee increases, but we do have a 15% reduction at this time period overall. This is mainly due to plant investment fees. We had a large amount that was collected in January of 2025, so that skews that percentage a bit. We've collected approximately 11% of budgeted revenues, and utility payments are collected in arrears. So expenses are at a 10% increase overall at the same time period of 2025. We do see that we have increased personnel costs, and personnel costs make up about 36% of the water fund expense budget. So overall, again, 10% of budgeted expenses at this time. In the sewer fund, we have an increase of 10% in our charges for service revenue. And again, due to fee increases, we have expended about 2% more than the same time in 2025 at 26% of the budget. Again, personnel expenses, they make up about 32% of the fund budget. We also, in the sewer fund, we have a debt payment that is in this miscellaneous charges. We've paid 50% of that debt payment at this time. So that's one of those that is not broken up evenly throughout the year, but we have paid half of this budgeted debt payment for the year. In trash and recycling, revenues are up overall about 1%, and we've collected about 17% of our revenues. That top line that says revenues, This is for carryout bag fees. These are up 7% over 2025. Miscellaneous revenues are down. This includes interest and other small revenues. And then in expenses, we are up around 6% as compared to the same period. In this fund, personnel costs make up about 32% of the budgeted expenses. And our last fund in our operating report is a transportation fund. We see at the bottom there of our revenues, we do have a negative 84% overall. And individually, they're largely varied. I'm going to talk about these individually because there are a few things that skew these. This top line, it's a small amount, this 18,555, but it's a 728% increase. And so this is really representing some revenues that were started in mid 2025. This includes the pay by sell, which started in mid 2025. This line also includes business parking permits and micro transit fares. And miscellaneous revenues down at the bottom includes interest revenues, but it also includes, it shows that negative 98%. If you'll look to the far left, you'll see the prior year actuals at 1.9 million. This represents a gain on the sale of property in the transportation fund, and that is what is skewing that number. So we'll likely separate that on future reports, so it'll be a little easier to tell. So in expenses, we are up around 7% over last year. We have expended around 13% of the budget at this time. And personnel costs do represent 57% of budgeted expenses in this fund. So that is the end of the finance report, and I'll be happy to take any questions, if any.
Just tap it.
Jessica.
All right. Hi. Thank you. The sales tax trend versus 2025. I know we had a terrible winter, so that affected probably some tourism and such. Do you think it's tourism softness, an economic shift, or is it timing? Is it too early to tell?
It's a little too early to tell.
Yeah.
So we do watch this month by month, and we will, continue watching it. Sometimes these even out. Sometimes we have months that are a decrease. And so, yeah, we will continue watching. It's a little too early to tell.
The transportation revenue drop, that's pretty significant. Is that timing or versus structural or?
So most of that is made up of that land sale that was $1.9 million. The charges for services are down about 3%, almost 4%. Fines are down as well. But most of that is kind of skewed by that land sale.
Got it. Is there any other concerns that we need to kind of be watching as we head into, it's terrible to say it's April, but we're headed into budgeting season already,
Well, we definitely want to keep an eye on our expenses. And we know in our current climate, there's things that are increasing dramatically, such as fuel and things like that. So we definitely want to watch those areas and watch our revenues as well. And of course, it's pretty early in the year, but we're happy to be bringing these reports to you now and be able to look at this as we go through the year.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Gloria. If we can go back to page 9, and I'm sorry, my packet's got numbers underneath the slides. I don't know if they've got the same numbers on yours.
Oops, wrong way. I think that is, I have them numbered on my notes. Okay,
Yeah,
it's general
I'm
fund.
bouncing between screens again, so my apologies.
But this one?
This is grant fund revenues budget versus actuals February.
Grant fund?
Grant fund revenues budget versus actuals February 2026. General fund, sorry, general fund.
Okay.
There you go. Yes. In the other miscellaneous category here, get my notes. The other miscellaneous is just a really large budget. And what's included in here?
I wish I would have looked that up before I came up here, but I did not.
Okay.
So I can send that out to council though.
Yeah, and my apologies. Usually I hit you with these questions prior to the meeting, and I didn't get the
It's okay.
process going this week. So if you could follow up with that, that'd be great. On to expenditures, page 11. Once again, we need a better way to navigate these. So this is sales tax collected. Yeah, there you go. Why did we jump to a budget of 22,500,000 in April of 2025 and then continue to use that?
So that budget is just because we don't divide it out per month. It's just saying that's the budget for the year, basically. And so as we collect it, we're showing that percentage of collected. So in January, we collected almost 8%. February year to date, we've now collected 17.71% of the budget.
So we decided in April of 2025 to move the budget up to 22,527,010. And we've
Yes.
kept that as a budget both for the rest of 2025 and then into 2026.
That is the budget for 2026. 2025, I'm sorry, I see what you're saying, and that is a error on the report. So
Okay.
it should be 21,955 all the way down.
All the way through?
Yes,
Okay, great.
yes.
No problem. And then page 13. Sorry. This is general fund expenditures budget versus actuals. Oh, you got it. You mentioned this, and I'm so sorry. I just didn't understand the 4,816% change.
Okay, this is showing the same time this year as last year. We did have some slight increases in our budget, but mainly this is just due to timing. When we finish up the budget, we get started with the year, we start executing these contracts, and then we start paying those out.
Okay.
And so obviously we must have got that process done a little quicker this year, and where last year we had some that were in arrears.
Okay.
It's just
all right.
timing.
One last question, but two parts to it probably. Does a 10% rate increase that we just did with the water fund, 20% for the sewer fund, does that equal out in a ballpark fashion about a 10% budget increase? Is it a to B there? And I can take this answer offline too.
No, it won't be a 10% overall increase. We do have some other revenues there, that miscellaneous revenue, which is down right now. And also these are collected in arrears. So, we haven't collected 2 full months of collections in 2026 yet.
But we won't necessarily see a 10% increase in the water fund because we 10% increase the fees to the water fund.
Right, it
For
won't
the
be.
users.
Those were the 10% to the rates as applied to all of the bills. And so, in theory, the rate revenue should increase by that amount. But the other revenues in the fund will affect.
Okay. Second part of that question then, does the 10% increase, whatever increase in rates that come into the fund, do they typically go to just operating capital or both?
Both.
Both.
Mhm.
And that's determined just by the budget that we set once we knew that we were going to do a 10% rate increase.
Right. So we have to cover our operating first.
Yep.
And then we look at what, those things are presented to you during the budget process as capital projects that are really, we had some this last year that had been pushed and pushed and pushed. And so in water fund, we did have some that we budgeted. And so, yes, it happens during the budget process.
Okay. And sewer fund rate increases always go to sewer infrastructure and sewer operations. Water always goes to water. Is that correct?
Yes. And,
Okay.
and the only difference with sewer is we do have that debt payment. And so we do have a bond covenant that requires us to keep a reserve
Okay.
as well in that fund. I did want to say also in the water fund revenues, although that is, well, I just lost my train of thought. Sorry.
No, you're fine. You're
I had
absolutely
another-
fine.
I had something I was going to follow up with and I lost it. Maybe it'll come back.
Great. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Gloria. Appreciate that. So going back to general fund expenditures, budget versus actuals, the fire. So you said that we're paying more as per the contract. So does that mean our contract went up
Yes.
by 127%?
Yes, that was for 2026. So the fire department or the fire district through the city did increase the mill rate, both their mill rate and the city's rate to pay for most of that difference. There
Gotcha.
is a subsidy through the general fund, but yes.
Okay. And then the non-departmental, that was on the general fund expenditures, budget versus actuals. Which one was that? Oh yeah, that was on the public works, community services, non-departmental. The non-departmental, you said that includes our insurance rates. Have we seen like significant rate adjustments in 2026?
So we did have increases in liability. However, we had some other decreases that offset some of those. We do have other things that are run through this category that are just citywide, such as our energy performance contract. And I think those are the only 3 examples that I put down, but I can definitely send you a copy of what's included in there.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be great if you don't mind, please. And then, like, are there other insurance agencies that we can go through, or is there only a handful that cover municipalities, or is this? Do we shop for that?
We do look at it every year as to whether we should, shop for it or what we should do basically during the budget process. Human Resources actually manages that contract, and so they would have more information on. We work with them during the budget process and looking at what the numbers are going to be. And a lot of times we get those kind of late, so we have to make the decision whether, kind of what we're going to do, and then we get those premiums a little later. But we did have some, good offsets, as I mentioned, that we had some decreases as well.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Gloria.
One brief thing, Mayor, since we've got you in front of us, I wanted to say congrats on the Finance Department winning the Government Finance Officers Association Award. I think it's been multiple years. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, well done. Just wanted to make sure we acknowledge that, and we had you right in front of us right now.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
The next staff presentation is Tract F, 2019 East 3rd Avenue, History and Opportunity.
An operations administrator, and today I'll be presenting alongside Brian Devine. Together we make up the Innovative Housing Solutions Division in the Prosperity Office. We will be discussing Tract F and the Mercy Plan development area, and we'll be talking about the history of that parcel and opportunity of future development and eligible uses. This presentation aligns with the city strategic plan, specifically the innovative housing and economic development and safety and quality of life goals. Before we focus in on Tract F itself, I want to just talk a little bit about the background of the neighborhood and the planned development. So when Mercy Medical Center relocated to Three Springs in 2006, the city of Durango purchased the land and replatted it into the Mercy PD. As you can see, maybe on your screens, tracks A through F. The public library was built on the old hospital footprint on Tract E, and the PD was amended in 2007 after some extensive outreach to the neighborhood in order to align it with the East Fastbinder neighborhood plan. The amended PD allows the city to manage shared parking and site infrastructure and integrate the library with adjacent uses. Fast forwarding to February 2024, the city issued a request for qualifications to find a development partner to build a project on Tract C, which aligns with the city's strategic goals. The evaluation committee ultimately selected a bid which proposed developing a new tri-county head start on Tract C and building workforce housing on the previous site on Tract F, which is the parcel we're talking about tonight. After receiving a lot of feedback from the neighbors over the inclusion of Tract F with the RFQ and bid process, the project team ultimately withdrew the second phase of their proposal. And at that point in time, there was no future development plans for the Tract F. The city decided to wait until the new Head Start was constructed and operations were moved into the new building to proceed to the next steps for Tract F. and Head Start will be moving in soon, so we decided to bring this before you today. And I'll pass it over to Brian to talk a little bit more about the PD and allowable uses.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council, and good afternoon, members of the public. For the record, I'm Brian Devine. I'm the city's Housing Policy and Planning Administrator. What you see on your screens is language directly from the Mercy Medical Plan Development Agreement, what we call the PD. A plan development agreement, you can think of kind of like custom zoning for a piece of property. So property in the city can be developed in compliance with the zoning code, or can request, and meeting the right criteria, be granted a plan development agreement, which specifies either a custom set of uses on the property, development standards that apply only to that district and not to the city more generally, or a variety of other factors. It's a pretty flexible tool. As we showed you on the previous slide, the Mercy Medical PD agreement was revised in 2007, essentially to set up these parcels for post-hospital use. The first version of the Mercy Medical PD was all about hospital uses and associated uses. There was this neighborhood plan that we showed you in 2006, and then the amended PD agreement in 2007, which established future uses of the sites. What you're seeing on the screen is the allowable uses for Tract F. That is the northernmost parcel that you saw earlier. These three categories refer to the approval process that's required under the PD agreement for each use. So allowed uses do not require a use permit. Special uses require a use permit that would be evaluated and issued at the staff level. And conditional uses are a use permit that gets a public hearing and is granted by the Community Development Commission. As you can see, there's a wide variety of uses that reflect the transition from a purely medical campus to a more diverse set of uses, including residential uses, some types of office uses, some cultural and religious uses, educational uses, et cetera. So there's a wide variety of uses, each with their own approval standard in the PD agreement presently. The PD agreement also contains some site-specific development standards, including setbacks from buildings to the exterior boundaries of the site, which are increased if on the other side of that boundary is an existing residential zone, such as to the north. There is maximum height language of 35 feet that applies to the entire PD area. There are no site-specific landscaping and signage requirements, which means the citywide requirements apply. Interestingly, there is no access allowed into Tract F from the alley north of East 20th Street. That's the alley immediately to the west of Tract F. So where you see the yellow number 42 is Tract F. The plat for this site does not allow for access from the alley to the west, only access from East 20th Street or from East 3rd Avenue. And then critically, one of the key elements of the revised PD agreement is shared parking requirements. So when the site was owned and managed by the medical center, there was no distinction between what parking was for what particular use on site. And that arrangement continued in 2007. So you'll see in the red numbers are, this is information from the land use permitting for the new Head Start building. These are the demands, the parking demands created by the different uses on site associated with each building. You'll then see the yellow numbers were existing parking spaces at that time, and blue parking spaces were created by the Head Start redevelopment project on Tract C. The key here is that each use, unlike most places in the city, each use is not required to maintain its exact parking requirement on site. We're required to have the correct total number of parking spaces for all the uses across the entire site. And so that's what you see here, the red numbers adding up to 337 parking spaces, and then the yellow and blue numbers also adding up to 337. And the practical application of this is that there are parking spaces on Tract F that are currently assigned to uses on other tracts. Or if new uses are added to Tract F, we'll have to preserve at least some, if not all, of those parking spaces. And we can take questions about this, but I do want to show the last slide before we do. As we said, following the previous engagement process around Tract C, any proposals for Tract F were withdrawn by the development team. So there is no current proposal to reuse Tract F. However, Head Start is getting pretty close to being able to relocate over to their new facility, which means we will have an unused piece of city property in a pretty valuable location. I think we'd all agree, pretty centrally located location. So what we have for you today, and what we'd love to take your questions on, is this presentation and a recommendation that is a process recommendation, not an outcome recommendation. And that is for a new community engagement process to be initiated by City Council, using the process framework of the request for proposals or request for qualifications framework. So as opposed to the city, say, developing a new municipal facility on the site, we think given the constraints on the site and the various goals and the various uses in the PD agreement, we believe the right process to use is request for proposals or request for qualifications following new community engagement to find out what the city really wants and needs on this location. We believe that the city should prioritize outcomes that align with the strategic plan. There are a lot of uses on that PD agreement that are aligned with both innovative housing and economic development, as well as safety and quality of life. We think that the proposals should serve the surrounding neighborhood and identified documented community needs. That's a pretty broad recommendation, of course. But we do believe that request for proposals is the appropriate process to resolve sort of the competing restrictions that exist on the site and look for a development partner after we refine some of what our priorities are through new community engagement. That's the end of our presentation. I'm happy to take your questions about either this process or the history of the site or anything else that we've discussed.
Yeah, thank you, Brian and Cody. I appreciate the presentation. I was on council when this all went through the first time and was a big part of it. Went out to the library district to do a personal town meeting there. And so I feel like I have a good background on it. And I wanted to say I appreciate the reset approach and the opportunity to have this discussion early. I think it's important, especially because I wanted to acknowledge the input that we have received from the neighborhood already. They have a desire to be involved in a meaningful way, and I think that's important to all of us. And I think leveraging that and making sure that we set expectations early on as to what it's going to look like is important. And I think it's something we all want to get right moving forward this time around. At the same time, this is one of the few city-owned parcels in the downtown-ish, not downtown, but the central location. I think it's important that we approach this as a community-wide asset and one that should ultimately serve broader needs across Durango. For me, this conversation is really about getting both the process and the expectations right from the beginning. So I do have a few questions. What's going to be? Do you know yet? I don't know if Clancy's here. She is. Do you know yet what will be different about this community engagement process versus the last one?
No, we're not recommending any specific timeline or specific outreach methods. But our main recommendation is not to rely on the community engagement that happened regarding Tract C.
Great. So it's basically starting over. Here we go. Because the last time we did this, we did choose, in theory, projects that were aligned with the strategic plan. So this achieve outcomes, the align with the strategic plan, that happened last time. And so I want to be clear about that. Like, that was our priority last time and we're continuing it this time, but that's not new.
I agree. Yeah. The reason we include that in the slide is really to try to tackle this very large list of uses, which is to say there may be uses on here that really don't align with a strategic plan goal. And after we've refined some of that, it's probably appropriate to have some kind of prioritization when we proceed to a request for qualifications that says, here are kind of the goals that we're looking for on the site. As far as, what council versus staff's input is into those specific prioritization, I don't think we've arrived at that yet. But I do think it's appropriate to have some prioritization in a request for proposals as opposed to just saying, hey, here's what's allowed on the site. What would you do? So I do think it's really not that different from what we understand that process was for Tract C specifically, except that we do believe, the community's evolved a little bit. Our understanding of the strategic plan, some of our data for what some of these needs are have changed. So we do think it's appropriate to, as you said, reset as far as community engagement is concerned.
And as I recall, when we did the first engagement session there were sticky notes. We were asking neighbors and people that participated to put sticky notes as to like first, if they could choose 1 and 2 and 3, what would they choose? The first one that they wanted was a community garden, but then it was childcare and housing had fallen in there along with some transportation. If I recall,
I was not present.
Okay.
You would have to tell me what the
I
results
think
were
I
of that.
believe that's
Excellent.
right. I can go back. I'm sure I have photos of it when
Sure.
I scroll back. If I believe that that's right. And so when staff looked at it, and I remember talking to Clancy about this, it surfaced with the child care and the housing because that was on the strategic plan and aligned with it. But the biggest thing that I believe Clancy walked away with on that is, and she can correct me if she thinks I'm wrong, is that like we didn't have a community engagement page that outlined the exact process and the timing, and this is when the RFPs went out, and this is when council can't really
Sure.
talk to you about this, and this is when we can talk to you about it because we were getting emails, in between. And so will we have something like that this time that communicates with the general public as to like the steps we are taking when we decide what the steps we're taking? Because that was
I was
Sorry.
going to say, I think it's fair to say that we've learned a lot.
Yes,
over the
totally.
last couple of years, but I'll let Clancy give more
Okay.
specifics if she'd like.
thank you.
I think in addition to that, we have the Engage Durango site now. And so there is a page that's dedicated to this project or how it has been in the past. If this is the direction that that you all want to go, we can then definitely update that page and kind of revamp it based off of new information. And again, like Brian said, we have new data as well. So we're in the middle of, we just had over 100 people apply for focus groups. And so we're going to be hearing from our community and updating that information regarding our strategic plan and our mission, as well as like the community survey results and things like that, that we will now have like really fresh data to be able to reference when we do create a process.
Great, thank you. Will council have an opportunity to help define clear priorities or guide principles up front before engagement begins or before an RFP is drafted? Or are you looking for that now?
I think I'd have to defer a little bit to the city attorney's office about how far we can go with prioritization. I think we'd agree that council probably shouldn't be designing
Yes,
projects on graph paper.
agreed.
But I do think there's an opportunity. Certainly we've, in our office, issued RFPs that have identified priorities and don't just say, here's what's allowed on the site. So I do think there's an opportunity there to refine what the priorities are. And it's probably up to council, the order in which you want some of those steps to happen within the bounds of the purchasing policy, if this is the route we decide to go.
In my mind, 2 big things happened the last time. One, we didn't say that we were looking for housing and childcare, like in black and white writing. And so when it went to RFP, I think the community neighborhood still felt like a garden was like up for grabs, when as like a council, that wasn't really one of our priorities. And so I think being specific and clear is super important. And 2, obviously, one of the big things was the 2 proposals or the 2 tracks and only 1 proposal. That was a big thing. And hopefully we've learned from that. But I just I'm trying to like be clear so we can not do the same thing we did before. How are we thinking about keeping options open, whether it's housing, childcare, mix of uses, without predetermining an outcome too early?
Again, I think some of that is up to council, how to proceed. I will say for some of these uses, it's easier or harder to connect them back to the strategic plan. I think we can sort of do that instinctually with some of them. Even within uses that are well aligned with the strategic plan, there are some where we have more data on documented need and some where we have less. For example, we've just completed our housing needs assessment. We have some data on, documented shortfall of childcare availability in the community, whereas we may not have the same documentation, for example, for a religious facility on site to say there is or is not a shortfall of religious facilities in the city, right? So I think we have some data that's available, and I think it's going to have to be a combination of what we already have to work with, as well as the results of that community engagement to get a project that benefits the city in a way that we can defend, in a way that we can say is connected back to data on cities' needs. I think that's where we would start at least.
And I have one last question. We got, like I said, an email from the Library Neighborhood Association. And I think it's important that obviously we include them and make sure we're talking back and forth. There was a few things in there that really put some guardrail, like the ideas that would put guardrails on things. And I want to make sure we're really clear about, like from a practical standpoint, if the community expresses interest in something like 100% affordable housing, can you help us understand what that would look like from a feasibility and funding perspective? Because I don't want to put restrictions on something
Sure.
to make it not able to go forward. Does that make sense what I'm trying to say?
I think I can give you the example.
So in the email that we received, in there, it was like, if housing goes forward, we want it to be 100% affordable housing. From a feasibility standpoint, I know as dealing with a lot of these housing projects, that's almost impossible. And if we put restrictions on something like that, it could, in the RFP, it could, like early on, right? And what I'm trying to find is this balance of being really clear in the RFP. So not only the community, but like we're also kind of getting like a goal, but without tying our hands and then making it so we can't do anything. Does that make sense? Okay, thank you. Yeah, sure.
I think the best response I can give is to talk about the RFQ for our Rivergate workforce housing project.
Great.
And Cody, feel free to jump in here. Cody was a big part of this process, but that RFP or RFQ, I should say, we tried to draw that line somewhere where we weren't designing the project for us. This is why we're asking for a private partner. That's why we're asking for a development partner. So we prioritized workforce housing in that RFQ. In that case, we had some funding requirements for how we expected to acquire the land. So we required the developers to provide a narrative. How will you comply with these funder requirements, for instance? So we were able to prioritize a workforce housing use on the site without foreclosing other options. And that's probably the best answer I can give of how that would work here, where what those priorities are, any proposal that meets those would be scored most highly. But if all of the proposals say, boy, we can't commit up front to 100% affordable at this definition of affordability, we would want them to express how they'll go about closing that gap, for instance.
I appreciate you coming and presenting this. I think it's important that we do acknowledge, we've learned a lot. We are growing. We have new data. We're continuing looking at, we're going to do this better. I do think it's important that we allow space for all of community input, because I think that this piece of land is a community asset, and as well as meaningful engagement with the Library Neighborhood Association. I want us to be clear about how we're going forward after, during, before community engagement, as far as we know. But I also am excited to see what we can come up with on this piece of property, because I think it's a beautiful area and wonderful neighborhood. So thanks.
Good. Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. So this, how large is the property?
The PD as a whole, or the tract?
The tract.
It is 1.5 acres is what's in my head. Oh, it's right. It's on the, yeah, it's about 1.5 acres.
1.5 acres. And so in that 1.5 acres, we are required to preserve how many parking spaces?
There are currently 42 parking spaces on site. This image is out of the Head Start approvals from a couple of years ago. So these numbers may have changed slightly, but I don't believe so. Our expectation is that any development on Tract F would be required to preserve all of those parking spaces. Okay. Not necessarily in the same configuration, I should say, same total number.
Same total number. So, okay. Is that, why is that? Why are we required to preserve?
Because it's a shared parking arrangement with
Okay.
all 6 of the tracts within that PD agreement.
And
So-
so the city owns all of those parcels, all the land?
Not all of it. Where the I can't tell how easy this is to see on the screen, but where the red number 105 is on the right side of the screen and the red number 65 on the bottom of the screen, those are privately owned office condominiums. So the city owns, for example, the parking lot with the yellow 174. And manages the entire site as a shared parking arrangement that provides for both the city use, which is the library, and then Head Start, our tenant, as well as the privately owned uses in those 2 medical office buildings. So
Okay.
those, you can think about it as those users are entitled to the parking that's already there on site.
Okay. And so I'm just asking because, I mean, some uses don't require as much parking.
True.
That's why I'm curious as to if it's required to maintain that many spaces.
It is the 42 parking spaces. You can think of those as associated with the uses that are already there. So if new uses go onto Tract F, those parking spaces would be preserved, and the new uses would have to include parking added for those new uses.
Okay. And so is there currently a structure on the site?
There is, yes. The structure is the current location of Head Start. Again, their new building on Tract C is nearly complete, but they're still operating out of Tract F.
So whatever is determined to go on that site, is there any reason why we want to keep that facility?
That is a possibility. Certainly, there could be a proposal that reuses it. Like I said, we've done our best not to engage in any project design.
Okay.
So it's hard to speculate, but certainly there could be a proposal that wants to reuse the structure itself. It's fairly old, yes. It was the Mercy.
Okay.
I don't have the
I
exact.
thought so, but I thought I would just be clear but it's not historic.
No.
So old, but not historic. So that's not a concern that we need to preserve the building.
It's not landmarked. That's
Okay.
correct.
And is it just, I'm familiar with the site by, just by looking at it, but of course not intimately and just given all the uses. So I guess there's no need to go through any environmental impact.
Not strictly speaking, no. I imagine that any proposal that's offered for the site, if we go forward with that process, the proposals process would probably include environmental survey, geotechnical survey, things like that,
Okay.
as a pre-development activity. But no, it's not our anticipation that the city sort of should do that in advance.
That's because it's been that use for some time?
Yes.
Probably like 50 years, like 30 years?
I don't have the exact date that childcare went in there. It was before it was Head Start. It was the location of Mercy Medical Center's on-site childcare. And boy, Mercy's had been there quite a while. So I do not know the exact year that it started to be used as a childcare facility.
Okay. Well, I imagine if there was any concern about contamination, that would have already been.
What we can do in a
presented.
request for proposals is provide that data to as part of a request for proposals. So say, here's the details of the current building in terms of square footage. You're allowed to propose reusing it, modifying it, or replacing it. And then it's really up to the proponent to provide a narrative. Here's what we would do with the site, and here's how we would study the steps that are needed in between. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I'm just wondered if that might limit the uses, if there was potentially some contamination, if there was asbestos in the building, if it, once you touch that asbestos, that's when all the concern happens.
I think developers will be thinking about that before they submit a proposal as to what those roadblocks might be, and then how they will deal with them would be included in that proposal.
And is there any benefit to creating a URA or some type of a development?
For the site specifically?
Yeah.
I think the site we haven't explored that specifically. My instinct is that the site is probably too small to benefit from an urban renewal plan area as Tract F on its own. It's not something that we've formally explored one way or the other.
Okay. just curious, and if that might benefit from that. And so I know that currently, right, it's pretty diverse uses, right? Is that safe? I mean, we have, so you'll forgive me for not knowing this, but is the structure where the library is the same structure from the hospital, or was
It is not.
Okay, so it was demolished and rebuilt.
Correct.
Okay. I was always curious about that because I thought, wow, how this functioned beautifully as a library. I just assumed it was the same building. So then there's no historic value anywhere on that site. Everything's been demolished. Everything's been
Again, we
or
haven't done a-
at some point or another variety of uses. So no like historical significance of anything on the site.
I can tell you the site is not landmarked. We have not done a formal historic analysis of the property.
Okay. And so when we go forward with an RFP process, when the time comes, I guess, that's when any number of potential people can submit.
Correct.
Is that, I mean, based on all these uses here. So I guess I've heard lots of conversations about potential uses for the site. So I'm just wondering about, if it's pretty broad ranging. It looks
It is.
like what can be done. So, I guess we'll just be open to the proposals as, as the community gives their feedback and we see what presents itself. I guess just the final question, is there an appraisal?
Not that I know of.
Okay. Is that something we would normally do?
It would be required in certain circumstances. Certainly, a proposal that proposes to, say, demolish the building and rearrange that site, I don't think it would be required. If we were going to sell the property, it would require an appraisal.
Okay. So only should that be the case for whatever reason.
Again, I think we would take that in response to, as this process evolves, if that becomes necessary.
Okay. Okay. Well, I think it's, we'll see how it goes. I'm also looking forward to sort of the community input process for something like this. This will be the first time I've experienced it here in Durango. And I'm curious to see what the community comes up with of uses. We know that and open spaces are always desirable, but perhaps we have a lot of open spaces in the community. And, I think that something that is a benefit to all of the users, I just look forward to that process. So thank you.
Thank you.
Brian, Cody, thank you. Presentation. So just a couple of quick questions. The 42 parking spaces on this tract, if we demolish the current Head Start building and it's an empty lot, we still have to provide 42 parking spaces. Anything that goes in there then has to carry its own, if it was all by itself, it would carry in its own parking number of parking spaces as well. I have that correct?
You do. The new uses would also be part of the shared parking arrangement. So technically we would have to increase the total number of parking spaces as opposed to these uses have to come with a parking space that's assigned to them.
Excellent foreshadowing for my next question. Is there much flexibility in the other parking allotments around these tracks that could absorb some of those extra spaces?
We haven't done that analysis.
Okay. Okay, but it does, any development is going to have a 42 parking space burden, quote unquote, associated with it just to get out of the gates.
Yeah, the 42 spaces that are there need to remain available for
with it, and it can be in the zone if they can negotiate that out.
Correct.
But it doesn't seem to me that Track C with the new Head Start is probably done with parking spaces. Like
Yes.
they couldn't put more there.
Not that I could foresee, but again, a proponent could propose something creative. One of the benefits of the request for proposals process is they can kind of do that analysis and say, hey,
Okay.
here's how I would meet the city's requirements.
Okay. The conversations have been leaning towards childcare, affordable housing. I imagine we're not going to try and build a sanitarium there, so some of these options kind of fall out of the mix, I think. But can we prioritize uses that connect to the library? One of the strengths of this piece of land to me is the fact that it's so proximity-wise to the library. Can we put that within the prioritization if we're also putting prioritization over types of uses, including childcare and affordable housing?
I think there's a process for that. Probably a narrative requirement demonstrate how your proposal benefits other uses in the PD, is connected to library uses, something like that,
Okay.
as opposed to, we need it to connect in this exact way.
Okay. And lastly, has the staff ever thought or gone through this thought exercise of just leaving the property for future use? If we can't, come up with a great use right now, is there merit in having this in inventory? We seem to, as a city, get rid of every city piece of land quickly and regret it 20 years later. So there's a piece of me that would be interested in thinking about the city's uses for that land that may be 10 years or 20 years out, that leaves it fallow or whatever you want to call it for the short term. Just a thought exercise, at least.
What we have done is consider what we think the appropriate process is right now. So there's kind of two answers to your question, I think. One is, if you receive proposals from potential development partners and none of them meet your requirements, or none of them score highly enough to proceed, presumably we would start to rethink things. The other is, if you don't do a request for qualifications in the first place and just say, boy, this is a piece of land and it's centrally located and we should just hold on to it and not do anything with it at the current time. That, I think, would have to be council's direction, simply because we are in possession of so much data about needs in the city currently that frequently, and we've given a version of this presentation to council before, frequently the best way that the city can incentivize those kinds of projects is through a land contribution. So that's really been our approach. That's not to say it's the only approach to sort of evaluating this problem.
Leaving the land vacant could be an option to be included with other prioritized uses.
Sure.
In the
I think it's hard
community
to get a
discussions.
proposal to.
Sorry,
leave it vacant.
in the community discussions, I jumped
Sure,
ahead
yes.
there.
In a community engagement process, I mean, again, I'd have to defer to council what you all want that to look like first,
Sure.
because of what we've learned from, previous outreach efforts. But, the council has a wide scope of action here, I would state. And again, our recommendation is to sort of prepare us for a better RFQ or RFP process through community engagement. But, you're council and I'm not, so, tell me what you all want to
All right, thank you.
Thanks again, Brian. So I'm kind of piggybacking on what Shirley had about land value. And so at Durango Crossing, we had, 6.7 acres. I can't remember the approximate acreage there, but there was a quantifiable amount of like how much that land was worth. So then that way, the taxpayers all knew how much was being donated, the value of that, and then how much that is helping hopefully offset some of those revenue or some of those development for the housing development. So do we have an approximate like land value, or do we, how do we come up with that with Durango Crossing? So do you know at all, like the process to try to quantify that?
Certainly the county assessor assesses the value of the land and the value of the improvements. It is tax exempt because it's owned by the city, but they still go through the exercise of assessing the property. Generally speaking, we probably wouldn't rely on that. We would probably rely on an independent appraisal for the purpose that I think you're describing.
Sure.
But we have not undertaken such an appraisal.
Gotcha. Yeah, to me, it just helps understand, if we do decide with whatever RFQ, RFP, we can do affordable housing, that we have, this is worth $2.2 million. And that's what the builder's getting out of it. And that's hopefully what we're receiving in return in terms of some of that push-pull with the potential developer. And then, so kind of going back to what you originally said, Brian, do you have a recommendation that we go through an RFQ, RFP first, and then really pursue robust and community engagement based upon the RFQ, RFP, or did I get that wrong? Do you want to potentially swap it? Like, what will be your recommendation?
I think our recommendation is to do community engagement with some clear boundaries prior to developing a request for proposals or qualifications. I think there's always a risk of writing an RFQ. That's a public document. Now you've sort of committed to your bidders. This is how you're going to be evaluated. If the community doesn't like that, what those priorities are, well, now you've sort of set yourself up for trouble. The converse of that is community engagement in advance of an RFQ process. It's harder to draw the lines of what feedback we're actually asking for. So I think, having some priorities that are based around the strategic plan and the PD agreement to engage with the community with an explicit goal of preparing a request for qualifications is probably our best way to sort of square that circle, if that makes sense.
Yeah, excellent. No, I just wanted to make sure that whichever route, is that something that you need council direction to do, or is that something that you all can pursue kind of on your own?
Certainly would like council's feedback. The one way for us to initiate that engagement process is to say, hey, here's what we've heard from your elected representatives. Here's kind of our starting point. Again, I think we have to be careful about council drawing boxes and saying we want it to look like this. But I do think hearing your feedback as the starting point is why this presentation was appropriate. And to just be really transparent with the community. This is a public meeting. This is not, nobody had to get invited to be here. This is as transparent as we can be about, we think these are the sort of the right order of operations here.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Really appreciate your time.
Okay, Brian, thank you. Okay, so I'm curious. Okay, so is there any difference between workforce housing and affordable housing? Do you have percentages? Do you have density? And what could go at F-Track?
The Land Use and Development Code does provide different definitions for workforce housing versus affordable housing. In general, those terms are used very differently by different organizations. So we always default back to the definition that's in the Land Use and Development Code. That is differentiated on the basis of income, what incomes are served by the development. And so, in general discussions, I'm sure we use the wrong term all the time. But when we get down to formal proposals and RFPs, we would default back to the definitions in the Land Use and Development Code.
All righty, that sounds good. Anyways, I think the approach that Jessica presented first off is probably the best method forward to do a lot of the community engagement before we go ahead with an RFP or Q or.
Mhm.
But thank you very much. Any more questions? Yeah.
Did you get some direction from council or board at this point?
It's a study session, so we can't give direction, but we can have, I'm just being clear. But we had a discussion, and if you needed more direction specifically, we'd have to bring it up under an agenda item in a regular meeting. Are you good? Or
That is my understanding, that if you had specific direction about process or specific prioritization for us to start with, that would presumably need to come through new business as opposed to today. Obviously, if there are more questions or more general feedback, we'd be happy to take it.
But do you have a starting point if we don't want to pigeonhole in? You have the knowledge and the background, and working with Clancy shaking her head. Yes, she has an idea of what she wants to do. She's the
Clancy's my boss
expert.
back there, so if she said yes, then I guess the answer is yes.
And so
I think so. I think so. I think our goal here, as much as anything, was to avoid any pitfalls of council saying, whoa, this was not the right process, or you didn't narrow these uses down in advance of community engagement properly, in which case, to the extent that it's appropriate to have it a study session, we'll take it now. To the extent that any of that would have to come through new business, we would take it then.
I think new business may be directing the city manager to find or to have the housing office start the process, because everything has to go through Jose. Right. So I think we just, under new business, I think that would be prudent to direct the city manager to start the engagement process and maybe getting some feedback as due. What's that? Is it? Oh, yeah. Well,
So is there any appetite for us to ask for new business to provide some scope to it that we would love to look deeply at?
What
business?
Yeah.
On the new business?
I'm just asking council in general.
We enter the item and then we discuss it the next time.
Yeah, I think we'd under maybe new business, direct staff, and then maybe we can have a pretty 30,000-foot view of the scope of that direction. And then Bob, what do you think?
Yeah, I believe that's the correct process.
Okay.
Any more questions for Brian? You have one?
I might.
Okay. Go ahead, Shirley.
So I'm sure somebody will correct me if this is not appropriate, but I think it perhaps more for Clancy. Is it, or have have you ever, or would it be appropriate to give examples of other uses? And the reason I mention it is, having done this in other communities, sometimes the communities are very clear about what they don't want, but not always clear about what's possible. Do you ever do that in your presentations?
Definitely. One of the things with the ethics of community engagement really is clearly defining for when you're inviting the community and you're seeking public input is that scope piece. So you're clearly defining what's on the table and what they're weighing in on and how their input can influence the decision. If it's kind of putting up the guardrails a little bit, like you as counselors really, can help guide that. Like it's nice to pare down a list like this. This is a very extensive list of uses. As you can see, a garden's not on there. And so being very clear when we come to the community of, here are the real options for what we're considering for this tract of land. And then getting input on that we can then bring to you or help guide that RFQ process or however we're going to go. I don't like to shoot from the hip too much about community engagement and designing that from up here, but defining the scope and those what we refer to as negotiables and non-negotiables is one of those key steps in the early process of community engagement.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I don't see any more hands, so thank you, Brian. I appreciate it.
Next up is item 2.3, grant approval update.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Tommy Crosby with the Economic Opportunity Division here. Going to present a slate of grants that are on tonight's regular meeting agenda and provide an opportunity for you all to ask any questions about the grants that you're going to be reviewing tonight. So as a reminder, this is the final step in approving city grants. Applicants submit their grant. Staff does a high-level review to make sure that those grants are compliant with the eligibility standards and requirements. Staff then hands those over to a group of subject matter experts to review each one of those grants. Those subject matter experts then convene as a group and provide you all with the list of recommended projects to review and potentially approve at tonight's regular meeting. The two grant programs that are represented on tonight's agenda are the Durango Creates Grant and the Renew Grant. The Durango Creates Grant, this falls under the Lodgers Tax Arts and Culture funding bucket. That funding bucket has two grant programs. Durango Creates is the smaller of our two arts and culture grants. These are for projects up to $5,000. Whereas the Lodgers Tax Arts and Culture Funding Program is the larger for projects over $5K. The Durango Creates Grant Program is administered by the Durango Creative District. They oversee that program. They do the application intake. They convene that group of subject matter experts, and City of Durango staff coordinates with the DCD on the approval and administration and associated financial obligations with the Durango Creates Grant Program. And then the second focus of tonight's grants is going to be the Renew Grant, dollar for dollar matching grant for any sort of property improvement that's visible from the public right of way. That grant is a matching grant up to $5,000. So high level overview, the Durango Creates grants saw just over $65,000 worth of funding requests come in. And the available funding for round one was between $15,000 and $20,000. The group recommended 8 projects to be funded at just under $20,000. That would leave roughly $15,000 for a second round of Durango Creates grants, having a deadline of mid-July for that second round. mid-June for that second round. And then the Renew grants, we saw 3 projects this time around. Between those 3 projects, they're requesting a total of $11,000. That would leave us with just over $22,000 for the remainder of 2026. I'm happy to answer any questions that council might have about the Durango Creates grants or the Renew grants on tonight's regular meeting agenda.
Yep.
Tommy, I just got a couple questions. I don't understand the bicycle room. Can you open that up a little bit for me?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm not sure how familiar you are with the Union Social House space.
Yep.
There's kind of the bar on the south side of the property, their outdoor space, and then there is the kind of the north side of the inside of their property, which is, I think there's a ping pong table in there. It's kind of a
Room.
it's been various art. It's been used as kind of a art gallery light. We might define it. There's a group that applied for the Lodgers Tax Arts and Culture grant that wants to create a Durango bicycle museum, for lack of a better way to put it. They didn't receive funding in the Lodgers Tax Arts and Culture grant. They received some feedback of ways to potentially improve their project, and they applied for a smaller version of this kind of living bicycle museum that would occupy the north side of Union Social House. It's led by 2 dedicated community members that really want to have Durango's bicycle history kind of come to life in a living, breathing space.
Great. All right. Makes total sense now. Thank you. And then Good Fight Boxing Gym, the Animus on the Animus. I'm not sure how it applies to Durango Creates. It's a boxing match, correct? There must be some other stuff here.
Yeah, no. They're tying it into kind of a larger celebration. There's actually going to be a musical and comedy performance that are tied in to that kind of festival day, about a half-day festival. It's going to be completely free to the public. I believe they're also doing a historical reenactment of the Dempsey boxing match.
Okay.
So there will be kind of a theatrical performance at play as well. But yeah, it'll be tied into a larger festival, music and comedy performance included in that half-day free public festival.
Great. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions here? Nope. We're good. Thank you, Tommy.
Thank you.
That brings us to item 3, council requested items, study session processes for boards and commissions appointments, covering the interview process and information sharing between council discussions submitted by Councilor Koso.
Thank you, Council. This was just a couple of additions, and if you can think back, this was from the August 19th meeting, so it's been a little while. I had to dust off my memories as well. So the 3 things that I was kind of looking for as we're talking through appointment of committee members were a couple of relatively minor changes, one of which I think Faye and her team have already implemented. I was looking to package the letters, the resumes, and the applications per each applicant kind of together. They had kind of been spread out, but we're starting to get those together, and I really appreciate that. I don't know if there's anything more that was needed there. Happy to let Faye weigh in on that.
The previous 2 rounds of appointments had only 1 or 2 applicants, so we were able to package those and email those by applicant. However, when we go to the major appointment process coming up soon, we have 70 to 80 applicants. We could certainly package those individually, but we would have to find some way to transmit those other than email. But there would be too many PDFs to simply email all the individual applications out.
Okay. So then it would come, and hopefully this is okay in a study session to kind of back and forth, but it would come out to us again, just as here's all of the applicant for the airport commission. Here is the applications. Here are the letters, et cetera, just in a file that's sent to the airport commission members.
What we've done historically in the past, we have taken so there's an application, a resume, and a cover letter from one person.
Okay.
And then the application, resume, and cover letter from another person. And we would combine all of those in that order for all of the applicants on one board as one PDF so that we could email those out.
Okay.
If we're going to package those as individual packets for each individual candidate, we would have to come up with like a Dropbox file or a SharePoint file, some other way to get those to you.
Sounds pretty arduous for 78 folks.
But
So.
it's possible. It's
Okay.
just, we'd have to come up with a different process.
All right. So in the small groups, it would be great if we could kind of tilt towards this, but I totally understand.
Yeah.
We don't want staff time eating up to that level on the big.
Can I ask a question
Sure.
real quick to you? Is your biggest, I'm trying to like stuff makes it easier for us, right? Like, and I'm assuming that's what you're looking for
Correct.
too. Okay, correct. So it wouldn't be to all of us necessarily because we get all of them in the packet, in the agenda packet. It's
Correct.
just for, sorry.
Actually, the applications are not in the agenda packet because they
Oh,
contain
right.
personal information.
No, you're right. You're right. You're right. Sorry.
Sorry.
I'm trying. No, you're great. I'm trying to remember. It's been a year and clearly I can't remember. Okay. Because what I struggle with, and I don't know with you, is when I'm going to get ready for the interviews, finding them all.
Yes.
Like, and so like if I'm on 4 different interview committees, or I think last year I was like on 3 or something, I'm like, where are all the, Creative Economy Commission? And I'm like looking, and what happens is then like someone applies late, which happens, and it's a pain in the butt for you. And then you send it to us, and now I'm trying to like find it. And is that the,
Correct.
okay, so I'm wondering if we can because it is hard for us too, and it's hard for you too. And so I'm wondering if there's a way that maybe with like IT and you guys that we can brainstorm a way to like have something that and we can get them like, you're like, oh, here's another one. Oh, this one came in late, and that's fine. But then like a week before the interview or 2 days before the interview or 24 hours, I'm usually doing it like 2 hours before the interview. So no big deal. Like be like, here it all is together in one pretty place that you can act. Does that make sense what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, it does. And I would add in when we're in the interviews at times, I'm trying to bounce between documents and it makes it very difficult during the interview.
And I don't know how much more arduous a drive or a Dropbox would be as comparison to kind of what you're doing now. Because to me, it's like you're still organizing it, just albeit in a different way. If everything was, per interview committee in its own folder, then that way you click on the folder and then you have all of the different individuals that have applied. Then I think to me that might be a little bit easier, hopefully maybe for staff, but
Even for
also
you guys. Like I'm looking for you too, not
more,
just us.
yeah, more intuitive for us to be like, oh, I'm interviewing for CEC or the CDC, and then there's one drive, I click on it, and then here's all the applicants.
You also just have to take into account our security and what
Right,
we're allowed
totally.
to do.
Exactly
And
right.
So I can dream up, but what
It'd be
we're allowed to do.
no more than email, right? I mean, email, all that information is being transmitted via email.
Right.
So it would, to me, like,
Encrypted emails.
Well,
Right.
can't we just put it in the cloud, and then, or,
no, I totally agree.
and then like, the committee you're on and just look at them.
I think there's flexibility in what any eventual solution is, and with a deep understanding that we don't intend to add a lot of workload onto staff for this as well.
No, we could certainly do that.
Okay.
We generally package those by applicant first before we combine them for that entire board regardless.
Okay.
So, uploading that individual packet wouldn't be a problem.
Okay.
I can work with IT and see if we can't come up with some way for council to be able to access those and still keep that personal information private.
Great. Okay. My second point, synopsis of findings, and I'm thinking about just one paragraph. When the committees meet and they choose 3 out of the 5 applicants, we just get the 3 applicants and we get no kind of narrative on why these were chosen over somebody else. And so wasn't looking for a lot of addition onto whatever the committee reports out, but was looking for some kind of a synopsis on that.
I mean, I would say too, there's a lot of times where I've done this for now 5 years.
Yep.
And there's a lot of times where like Dave and I will sit in an interview process and we'll be like, okay, yeah, these 3. And then we'll walk out and then we get to the meeting and I'm like, oh gosh, what were the 3 and why did, and like I'm just trying to refresh. And so having a synopsis potentially that we like spend 15 minutes on at the very end to put in a meeting packet or whatever might also help us be organized.
Totally.
Not that I want to admit how unorganized I am, but I'm just trying to
No,
like
it's a reality.
understand, say what I want to do something that will help. right?
Totally.
So
I totally agree in the synopsis, but I do not want to put in there why I chose one person over the other person.
yeah.
I just feel like, I
It can
want
be
to.
positive.
Yeah, totally. Like,
why we're choosing.
Here's the strengths of the three people.
here's the
we
strength.
chose.
Here's why we thought that they were going to be the best fit.
Sure.
And what I don't want to do is do some sort of comparative analysis as to why these other people did not.
I think the committee can have a lot of flexibility in how that synopsis
Okay.
looks. And
Synopsis is fine. I just don't want to do any sort of comparison or why they didn't get chosen.
I can see that.
Okay.
Yeah. One more point then, for the quasi judicial entities like the FAB, the CDC, how does council feel about the selection process being open to all council members who would like to participate? So you've got the minimum requirement, but if other council members, since these committees tend to have more authority, they tend to be more, I don't want to say important, all the groups are important, but it would be, I think it would be interesting to have all available council members who want to be part of the interview committee a part of those.
Just real quick, FAB is not quasi judicial, correct? They don't make any sort of.
I'm not sure, actually. Do you?
It's just more decision making too.
Right.
Here, a little.
The
backwards.
CDC
Yeah.
makes caught up. I mean, they,
Yeah.
they can do things, but FAB just,
No.
they don't make any sort of like
They're just making recommendations.
decisions.
Make
Okay, I
recommendations.
just want to make sure that.
So, but
there-
going
here's-
back again, 5 years, we all used to be on all selection committees
Sure.
for the board. They serve at all boards and commissions serve at our pleasure, right? And it's going back to just the reason why it changed is because there was like 2 of us that would show up to and then it wasn't following procedure. And so then did we have to reschedule it? And it's hard, right? There's 5 of us and it's hard for us to get all the meetings in all the time, especially when this occurs. Like, there's, for example, this is going to occur over high school graduation where I'm going to be crazy over May with my son graduating and the start of summer. And it just gets to be a little crazy. And so we moved it to be like, okay, 2 people and a board. I am fine if we want to go back to everyone interviews everybody. I'm not saying we do that, but I
Yeah.
agree. I'm fine saying that, like, if you feel like a board is important and I'm not saying that FAB and CDC or any board.
Right.
I just-
agree.
That was
Walking the
I'm
line.
sorry, that was not. I did not mean to do that. I'm just saying that I'm fine.
Maybe like if we all still say that there's these 2 people are going to be in charge of the interview for this board,
Agreed.
but then somebody else can show up,
Yeah.
but maybe just be a spectator. Or do you feel like they should be able to?
I did feel like they should be able to be part of the interview committee.
The only problem
Ask
with that
questions.
is we have 15 minutes for interviews. And so when we did it with 5 people before, we still only had like 4 questions and we came to the agreement of what 4 questions were going to be asked. I asked one, Shirley asked one, and then you didn't get to ask one, but you were a part of requesting questions. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Because it's still 15 minutes because there are times, especially with FAB and CDC, those are typically ones we will get a lot of
Right.
people interviewing. So anyways.
Yeah, this is the reason I wanted to have the discussion is just to
I'm
see
fine.
what's the
I think,
best
yes, we do
situation.
it. And we just come to a consensus, whoever's on the interview committee.
That's what we've done before is like, we just have, basically have time for 3 questions.
Sure.
And so we all agreed on whomever the interview committee was, we agreed on the 3 questions, including the staff representative or the board representative. And then we all agreed on it. And then we just asked those questions.
So just one additional consideration, because we have done this before, while all of council has interviewed various applicants, it does become a public meeting. All interviews are done in the public and all of the people you're interviewing last can hear the first interview. Just so you're aware of that.
Good point.
Yeah, there's also all the notice requirements that come along with that as well.
No,
Okay.
it would be a public meeting.
Well, you know what? I found that, actually, I like the way it goes because usually 2 of us are there and we get 3 questions at the most. And like the 3rd question, we're just really like pressed for time because you also want to talk to them, see how are they workable with this kind of group? So I don't see what the issue is. What is your issue about doing it the way we've been doing it? Because it is really time consuming to get there at, 11:30 and,
Well, I kept it to the current system plus if there was another council member that wanted to add on, we'd still have the current system and that other council member can add on. I got to admit, the open meeting law provides some hesitation on that whole piece for sure for me. But I do feel like there's just more authority in several of committees, boards, commissions that are just more impactful on council decision making. And so that was probably a driving piece on this whole thing for me. And really, I just wanted to bring it up because I love the various perspectives on what's working and what's not. I haven't been here for 5 years or whatever, so it's good. Okay. It's fair. Yeah.
If somebody wants to take my position, I'm more than happy to give it up.
Copying up. Those are the key things. Was there anything else anybody else had? Those were the kind of key points that I just wanted to bring up. So if I hear everybody correct, I think staff will work on the packaging and how we access those documents. The synopsis of the findings in one paragraph. I'm not sure we need a formal vote or anything on that, or included in the manual. Yeah. Yeah.
He's direct staff.
Yeah. Okay. So that would be, I'm good. Thank you.
If that concludes discussion, then that would bring us to item 4, proposed new agenda items for discussion.
You know, I think going forward, we should still put the parking on for the PD City Hall because once we get it presented to us, we're still going to want to discuss.
The one that's this afternoon or this evening, you want to put it on here because it's I think that we can, because it's on the agenda this afternoon, we can request a study session. It doesn't have to be here to have a study session. This is just us. So I think this is an opportunity, if I'm correct, not Guild, I'm looking at you. If I'm correct, this is an opportunity for us to discuss things that we might want to put on the new business. Does that make sense? Study side, yeah, for coming up. Like it's an opportunity for us to talk about some potential things.
I just have a concern I wanted to have for open discussion. So often the new business items are after a long and sometimes fractious council meeting. I don't think they're getting the fair hearing that they deserve sometimes. I don't know if there's a mechanism where we can both provide an option for ourselves to discuss at the study session on the months that we have before, as well as the meeting time. These new business items are listed for the business meeting. I get that they've got to go there for the public notice piece, but I just wanted to open it up if anybody else saw that same issue. That at the tail end of the meeting, sometimes it's just not a great time to bring something new.
I noticed, and something it's a little different, but kind of in the same vein, is that we can technically, so this whole thing like that we have to put new business on at the end. So like, let's say there's nothing on there that I have, for example, on new business tonight. But if I wanted to put something on there for the next meeting, people feel like they have to do it tonight when we don't. We just have to get it to Kyle or the appropriate person by Wednesday or whatever, right? And so there's like a procedure that we could, I think, streamline a little bit better. We did change the agenda, not new business necessarily. We did change some things. So we got through current business before we discuss like public comment on non-business items and this. And then it's also something too, like there are new business items. So if we're tired and we want to be like, can we just push this off to next week, you guys? We can. And so I do like that it's at the end for that purpose, because like, for example, not that they're not important, the things that are on there today, I don't want to say that, but it's usually not like a 911 that we have to deal with, you know, does that make sense? And so those are just my initial thoughts.
That's where you feel like it's getting pushed back, or it's because seems like for a study session, I mean, haven't we been doing it like this, or is this the first time we've done it like this? Okay.
Because this is an opportunity to get a little extra
Oh,
time.
I see.
I just wanted to ask if people saw the same problem. I thought that sometimes we're getting, just, let's get through this real fast. Before I start talking.
Well, we're not supposed to talk about it either. That's the other thing. You're not, it's supposed to be short.
It's supposed to be short, but there is just the factual nature of you checking the temperature.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a functional piece to introducing it as new business under new business. Dismissed. Again, me just throwing something out there, see what sticks to the wall. If it's not an issue for the rest of the council.
Yeah, I think okay. I mean, sometimes there's just no appetite because there's just no appetite. Not necessarily that we're not that we're, like, oh God, just get to the meeting. Nobody's seconding it because I don't want to deal with this. I don't think that's that's not the sense I get. 'Cause sometimes I've not gotten a second. It's just no. Well, I guess I'm the only one. Guess I'm the only one who thinks that way. So yeah, it happens, and maybe there's some community building otherwise.
Thank you, Mayor.
It is 3:35. If time permits, we do have a community development update if council would agree to that.
Exciting. All right. Good afternoon, Council. Jamie Lofco. I'll be presenting your 2025 year in review for community development. And while community development touches many of our strategic plan goals, we provide most support for our innovative housing and economic development. In the presentation, I'm going to cover some of our process improvements, education that we've done in 25, and then move into highlighting some projects that have been improved or completed. And then I'll cover some of our permit data. All right, so let's start with our review process and improvements. We began using OpenGov in July 2024. So 2025 was our first full year of using the software. And while it helped us provide services online, provide a better customer service, we've been making changes throughout the year to more streamline that process. OpenGov is always coming out with new tools as well, or opportunities for us to streamline those. We've also expanded the usage of other departments within the city, and the Durango Fire Protection District has also began using OpenGov in 2026 for their permit review. We are starting right now to build a new process for our plan review function that's going to create a better opportunity for us to coordinate our comments, provide better service to the applicants. It will also allow us to track our review times to be able to have another metric to report back to council on how much time it's taking us on different types of applications to get through the review process. And looking at the process outside of OpenGov, we did take some time to step back and do some education and understanding between departments because we have engineering, parks and rec, planning, building, the fire, and GIS. They're all pieces of our development review process. And so I put together Development Review 101 series. So each one of those departments put together a presentation. We attended. They told us the importance of their role in the process and what they do as part of their process. And each department was allowed to ask questions. We recorded those, and we did share that citywide for anyone who would like to be able to review those videos and presentations. And from that, we've continued to have individual meetings with individual departments to continue that collaboration, to continue building on that, to make sure that we are keeping those lines of communication open. And the second thing we did was more at the request of the Community Development Commission. We get a lot of questions for them about how projects are going to impact city service. And so we've added an infrastructure impact analysis to the staff reports that we give to them. And that looks at water, sewer, streets, and stormwater. And it'll basically give either a level of service or where we're at on our capacity. And then say, okay, the proposed project is X and it's going to have this amount of impact to those services, just to give them a general idea. And some of those will come to you as well, and it'll be in the staff report. We did also create our building division in 2025. So we hired a building official, we replaced a building inspector and our permit tech, and we reclassified a position to be code compliance. And so once those were in place, we brought all of our plan review back in-house. And we began evaluating those procedures. So then we adopted our 2024 international codes. We adopted the Wildfire Resiliency Code. We've started the process to bring our plumbing permitting and inspections back in-house from the state, which will take effect in July. And lastly, we have started to funnel a lot of our code compliance requests through SeeClickFix. We felt like OpenGov was not the best process to use for that. It's a quicker process, easier process for people to report things through SeeClickFix. And so we've started to use that as our code compliance mechanism. And so all of that is part of our mindset of continuous improvement. And we're always looking for ways to improve our process and improve the services that we provide to the public. All right, so one of the parts of improving and streamlining our processes is evaluating our codes. And so we have two different types of codes in community development. The first is our Land Use and Development Code, or LUDC. That is our zoning and land use permitting administered by the Planning Division. It covers what a property can be used for and how it can be designed. So we had several changes in 2025. We had the Wildfire Code amendments and non-functional turf. Those were state mandated amendments. But we also had parking amendments, fair share amendments, and other general cleanup items that we did to reduce conflict and bring clarity. And then we also began discussion about our text amendments related to ADUs. Second type of code is our international codes, our building codes administered by the Building Division. And these cover how a structure is built and occupied. So we had several changes, including the 2024 international codes, and that includes anything from building, residential, fire, plumbing, electrical, anything that covers our buildings, as well as 2025 Wildfire Resiliency Code. All the codes were adopted in late 25 with enforcement date of January 1st for the international codes, and we've just started on April 1st with the administration of the Wildfire Resiliency Code. And I will note that the requirement for that was July 1st. So we are kind of ahead of the curve on that. And so a lot of other communities are kind of looking at us as an example of how we're going to handle this. All right, let's shift into projects. Got a lot of projects. I just wanted to touch on some of them for you. I'm going to showcase the broad range of projects that we have. So Silverview Lane was a map amendment that we had in the joint planning area. So that demonstrates our ongoing coordination with the county, and incremental extension of city services to enable development. We've got the hub at Animas City. That's going to be a coffee shop and food truck pod that's going to activate our 32nd Street and County Road 250. The Confluence Medical Office building is going to be a 32,000 square foot building that will complete the Mercado streetscape in Three Springs. And then we have the Durango Mesa Park, with that project being a ongoing partnership between the city and the Durango Mesa Foundation to fund infrastructure to achieve the long-term vision of the plan. The current phase is the bike park and amenities phase 1. So that's going to be where they have the paved pump track. It's going to be popular for a lot of our ages in the area. And so that is going to be the focus for the next 2 years, is building that out. And I do want me to note as well that there was a lot of activities that used to happen that took the year off in 2025, and those will be back in 2026 now that we've got the emergency road in there and the water. Several other projects. We have Mesa Verde Estates. It's a assisted living facility with 124 units that did receive their certificate of occupancy in March of 26. So that will be getting going here soon. We have our Starbucks on South Fork that opened in early 26. REI that opened in summer 25. The Durango Surgery Center, which gave us, 3 operating rooms and 2 procedure rooms, opened in July of 25. And then Fire Station 2 gave us a improved safety design that has drive-through bays and space for vehicles, including their ladder and ambulances. And then the Boundary Hotel just opened on North Main in early 26 as well. Then our residences at Durango, which is 120 affordable units, phase 1 with 72 studio and 1-bedroom units that opened in July of 25. And then phase 2 was 48 2 and 3-bedroom units that opened in November of 25. We do have Affinity Apartments that's currently under construction. It'll be 162 apartments when it's completed. Their clubhouse and leasing office are complete and have a certificate of occupancy. And we do anticipate requests for certificate of occupancies for the individual buildings coming in as early as this week for one of the buildings. And lastly, I wanted to touch on childcare centers. We did approve 4 new or expanded childcare centers in 25, and they're either currently under construction or they're in their building permit review. So the first one's Head Start, located in the library area. So it replaces their existing facility where they had 75 toddlers and preschoolers. The new facility will have 94 toddlers and preschoolers. We've got Durango Early Explorers out on County Road 250, and they're going to increase their enrollment from 12 preschoolers to 40 preschoolers and adding 10 toddler and 6 infant spots. The Growing Place, it will be in a single family home next to a church, and they will have a maximum of 10 toddlers. And then we have the Carlton Center over at the Powerhouse that will plan to serve 44 children, toddler and preschool. All right, let's move into our permitting. Community Development reviewed a total of 566 land use permits in 2025. So the type and number on the screen and vary depending on the type of permit. Pre-applications were our highest type of permit in 2025 with 100 of those, or 18% of our total. And this shows that applicants and property owners are taking advantage of the free service that we're offering to review things before they formally submit things. It can save them time and money on a project, come in and have that discussion with us ahead of time. I will note of these permits, 85% of those are administrative permits and 15% will go to a hearing before HPB and CDC and sometimes even City Council. I wanted to highlight a couple specific ones. We have annexations, which is where we bring property from La Plata County into the city's jurisdiction. We did have 3 of those in 2025. The first one is the 32nd Street Collective. It's 1.9 acres and was zoned residential medium and is planned for 12 residential units. And construction is slated to begin in 2026 on that. Durango Crossings, approximately 8.5 acres. It is a planned development. It was approved for 154 units and approximately 14,000 square foot of retail space. And as noted earlier, this did include multiple property owners as well as city property coming together for this project. I will note that there is a revised conceptual development plan under review right now for this project that will increase both the residential units and square footage on this property that will be coming to council in the near future. The last is Durango Motor Corp. It's 4.1 acres. Commercial general, it's currently under construction. It'll have a 23,000 square foot space for pre-owned cars and service center. Wanted to touch on our vacation or short-term rentals. These are our rentals of 30 days or less. In 2025, there were 143 active vacation rental permits with 10 new rental permits and 6 terminated permits. So a net increase of 4 permits in 2025. And permits are terminated when the owner sells the property because it is not transferable. Wanted to touch on enforcement. We do use a software called Rentalscape to scrape the internet to look for rentals that may be a violation, and they do send that information to city staff. We review it to see, okay, is this a long-term rental? Do they have a permit that they're not aware of? Or if it is in fact a violation. If it's a violation, then we do start the process of sending out letters to them. And Rentalscape did issue 8 first violation notice, 3 second, and no third, resulting in we're getting compliance with these letters. Alteration certificates, that's where we have a property in our historic district or is a historic landmark that wants to come in and do some sort of modification to their structure. That requires them to have an alteration certificate that's reviewed by staff and recommended to the Historic Preservation Board. We did have 45 of those in 2025. Wanted to highlight just 2 of them to give you an idea. The one on the left is your Garden Torch building. While they had a lot of significant interior renovation, they did do some restoration on the exterior of the building as well. And the wavy glass that's on the door, as well as the fan light or transom above, is something that they restored to historic value on the front of the structure. And then we've got the Lemur House, which is at 747 East 3rd. And they did restore the house by putting back in historic style windows and creating a new paint color that in trim accents that would bring it more back into the historic character. And you can also see that the chimney was restored. All right, let's move into our building permits. The slide's going to break down between different types of permits as well as residential and commercial. You can see that general permits are the higher one because that's going to be basically anything that doesn't fall into a specific category. And this is new construction, renovation, or tenant improvements. That's where all the general permits will fall. And you can see residential is typically going to be a lot higher than our commercial permitting. So each of our building permits is going to have multiple inspections. So in 2025, we had a total of 2,769 inspections. Of those, 85% were done by our building division, resulting in an average of about 9 inspections per workday by our one building inspector. This you will see, will continue to grow because we're getting more use out of this. Engineering is starting to rely on more on recording their inspections. You can see they only had 190. That by far does not represent the number of inspections that they did. So getting them to utilize the software more and recording those. Same with Cross Connection and Arborist. And we've also recently added a planning inspection as well. While planners have been going out there to check a project at the end, there was not really a checks and balance to monitor and sign off as an inspection. So that will be part of the process as well. So we will see many more inspections coming in. Just wanted to give you a little bit of a comparison, 24 to 25. We had that data for building permits, didn't really have it so much for land use permits. For the number of units, the significant increase you will see is the 120 units for the residences. That's why you see such a big difference between 24 and 25 on the number of units. But total building permits issued, we have gone up about 60 permits, and that's more going to be attributed to compliance efforts. We have our code compliance officer out there making sure people are getting permits. We have a lot of roofers who have not been getting permits in the past. And so we're going through the process of trying to educate them and understand what the importance of getting the permit from us. And so we will see that continue to increase as well with the new window and siding permits. So we will continue to see increases in that. Code compliance, I wanted to share that briefly that in C-Click Fix, we had 117 cases that were assigned to community development for signage, lighting, blight, fences. Of those, 105 have been closed and 12 of those cases that remain open have been assigned to the correct division. Sometimes C-Click Fix, it's finding the right department that needs to deal with the case. So we only have one open case really related to lighting that we're still working on. But there are other categories of public comment or contact us or other that are not really specific. So we did have 34 of those cases in addition to the 117, and we do still have 4 of those remaining open. And most of those are related to the Dual Hotel. We do keep those kind of cases open until the project is complete to ensure that we fully addressed the comments of the complainant. And we have seen an increase in C-Click Fit cases. In 2026, we've already seen 56 cases assigned to community development. So I think we'll see higher numbers as we go through and people learn to trust the system there. All right, to close out, just wanted to kind of tie it all back to some outcomes for you that we have advanced a culture of continuous improvement. We're focusing on delivering clearer processes, stronger collaboration, more consistent customer service. With the first full year of OpenGov, we've provided online permitting, but we've refined those workflows. We've expanded the record types. We're introducing a new coordinator review tool, trying to make those improvements to increase transparency, create meaningful checks and balances for us, and allow applicants to better understand their requirements early, which is reflected by our pre-application numbers being so high. Our cross-department collaboration has been strengthened. The 101 series brought all those departments together to help define the roles, to better coordination. We've brought DFPD in with their use of OpenGov, and then also enhanced clarity to the CDC by providing our infrastructure impact analysis. The formal creation of our building division really expanded our in-house capacity. To have local control over our plan review, improve the consistency in our reviews and the comments people are getting and expectations from our building division. Educational efforts, they've gone to great lengths to connect with the development community and build those relationships to make sure that they're understanding our expectations when we're coming out there, whether it's plan review, whether it's an inspection, or whether it's a certificate of occupancy they're requesting. It's really important that they've developed those relationships. And they've had more than 2,700 inspections this year, so that's a lot. Our community reporting and responsiveness has improved. So we've had a lot of C-Click Fix cases, and it's increased in 2026, demonstrating public trust in our formal reporting. And efforts for the broader community, we've had the 4 new and expanded childcare centers that we've had a total of 566 land use permits. And with 368 building permits, saw a rise in the volume created by major project, but also improved compliance. And overall outcomes reflect a commitment to service, clarity, and accountability. We're working continuously to modernize our process, to strengthen our internal coordination, and ensure that Durango is reviewed is consistent, and we look at it with the community's long-term needs in mind. So I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Jamie, thank you. Really great to see kind of these kind of synopses occasionally. So I just want to start off. Your department's very visible. You are everybody's favorite punching bag at certain times. That's acknowledged. I think you guys do a great job of keeping it professional. And you just play a critical role in keeping this city livable and highly regarded. And I can't stress that enough. So thank you for that. I also wanted to put some praise on the fact that I think the CDC is a well-oiled machine and the staff support there is fantastic. So thanks for your inclusion there. I go back to a favorite topic of mine, which is the time it takes for a permit to be done, especially allocating the time that you are done with it, send it back to an architect, an engineer, a contractor, and how much time they take, because I think everybody forgets that these permits are often held up by the owner themselves. So are we making any progress on trying to get those timelines defined and maybe in front of council in a quarterly fashion?
We have timelines defined in our code that we've got 21 days to review the project. It's a matter of tracking that OpenGov is not great at that yet. Until we get this plan review function up and running, it doesn't give us enough start and stop time to be able to see that without doing a lot of manual work on the staff side. But we are working on that to get the plan review up and running. I will note, though, I think a lot of the times that when we hear people are upset about how long it's taking is sometimes the perception that, well, I started my pre-app in January.
Right.
You didn't formally submit anything until like May. So those 5 months they think is part of the process.
Right.
And so that's where I think we need to be better in our communication with them, that the process formally starts when you submit a complete application to us. That's when the 21-day clock kicks in. And that will, the plan review will track from the day we get it to the day we send it back. And then it will stop. And then when we get it again, it will start the clock again, and we'll be able to track that for us. So at the end of this year, I'll be able to give you some data of where we were, at least for probably 6 months of the year.
Perfect. Great. One of the most frequent conversations I have, obviously, with business owners as well. So anything you can do to arm us with some good feedback for them is appreciated for sure. The childcare facilities that you talked about, do you feel like we're both improving our time that it takes for childcare facilities to get approved, expand, whatever growth that they want to try and attain? That's improving, as well as the likelihood that folks are finding it easier so that they're more likely to open childcare facilities. I know this is a anecdotal question, but do you feel like we're making progress on those?
We try to make the progress and the process as seamless as we can.
Yeah.
And we treat them the same as everybody else. I think what we've heard from in the past is a lot of times it's not necessarily us holding them up, it's the state requirements. And so that's just part of our process, is we can't issue our approval without having some of those steps taken. There are going to be some hurdles, just like we had with the warming center, when you have certain specifications when they're trying to go into an existing facility. That's where it becomes difficult. So when you're trying to go into an existing building, and we have to make sure public safety standards are met.
I feel like a lot of the feedback that we get, or I get at least, is related to just not understanding the process. They just don't, and they end up spending extra money because they don't understand the process. They go down to some dead ends and those things. We had talked about a navigator or some kind of a navigator position that might help out those kind of facilities. Any movement on that, or any further thoughts on a navigator specific to childcare? Okay. The last question I had was on the vacation rentals. I know the city doesn't have a lot of vacation rentals, but what I worry about an awful lot is the density of the vacation rentals. They're concentrated in the older neighborhoods for sure. Is there any density limitations that we have in regards to issuing permits for vacation rentals? So
yes and no.
Okay.
And EN1 and EN2, of course, there's a limitation of 22 and 17 permits. They're capped, and we have a wait list for those. When it comes to other areas, there's not necessarily a cap. It's one of those where we had one just recently. What was it? You can only have so many on a block, and if somebody wants to come in with a second one on the block, it has to be a part-time. It can't be like year round. So that's a small checks and balance that we have in place for that. But you will see, I mean, of the 143, there is a large bulk of them in Faringway up on Gig Line, and then one other place off of 15th, I want to say. There's and one in downtown that have a lot.
But EN1 and EN2 right now, there's no more allowed.
Nope.
And then how often does a termination lead to an immediate application, or just there's a wait list? So we see terminations, but we don't see ever a decrease because there's always somebody on the wait list,
Yes.
or the new owner often will just apply immediately to get it back registered as a vacation rental. Does that happen?
No, we immediately go to the wait list. If somebody terminates theirs, you immediately go to the first person on the wait list. And sometimes it's, well, I've got a long-term renter in there. I can't do this right now.
Got it. Okay.
So we end up going to the second person. So it's not immediately that they turn over.
Okay, great. Thank you.
The vacation rental is there any definition of how we can keep those separate? Because can somebody say it's really an accessory dwelling, it's not a vacation rental?
Right. It's basically, it's a dwelling unit, whether it's a single family home, a duplex, an ADU, a vacation rental, all of those are a dwelling unit by definition of the code. And so there's not a very good distinction between them other than the way they're occupied. So the ADU is secondary to a primary home. A vacation rental can be the primary home, or it can be secondary to the primary home if you have a duplex. But if you have an ADU on the property, we do not allow either one of the units to be a vacation rental.
Okay, great. Any more questions? No more questions? Well, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Adjournment. We're adjourned.
I mean, I'm gonna